As anyone who has planned a funeral can tell you, many people have been pressured into buying more expensive products. And this happens when people, are at their most vulnerable. So there are times when people agree to getting their Grandma Linda a gold ultra luxe coffin because you're like, Grandma Linda deserves that, okay? But then they're not even realizing how expensive it's gonna be. So in the past, funeral homes have said that every body has to be embalmed for health and safety reasons, which actually isn't technically true. Embalming a body helps to preserve it, like Honest Abe on his train death tour. But there's no state law that requires routine embalming for every death. According to the National Funeral Directors Association, unnecessary embalming adds an average of $695 to the funeral bill. So back in the 1980s, the government created the funeral rule. Now, this was supposed to create some regulations on the funeral industry so they wouldn't be ripping people off left and right. Now, they did this by requiring funeral homes to give their customers an itemized list with the prices for each service they offered. They were also no longer allowed to lie about things like embalming. So if you want to skip the embalming and just get the burial, funeral homes have to not only let you, but also give you an accurate price breakdown for that. You get it. If funeral homes fail to do this, then they have to pay a fine. So, cut to 2023. The government conducted a massive investigation into funeral home practices. What'd they find? Well, I guess they went all undercover with it, and they called up over 250 different funeral homes, and they were pretending to be a grieving family in need of services. Turns out, after all these calls, 38 funeral homes were not transparent about the proper embalming process. And that might not seem like a big number, but each of those funeral homes represents tens of thousands of burials each year. Also during this investigation, the spotlight was turned on one company known as Service Corporation International, aka SCI. Dun, 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 dun. Just kidding. And turns out SCI over here, they turned death into big business. So this company SCI currently has a monopoly on the death industry, meaning that they own most of the funeral homes and businesses across the country. Oh yes. So because it's a monopoly, SCI can control the prices across the board. It's like McDonald's, but with funeral. You know what I'm saying? Kinda. If you squint, it's kind of similar, but not really. Anyways, they have a sneaky way of doing this. So they go into small towns and they buy out smaller funeral homes. So what they do is they'll keep the same charming small town name for the business, so the community and everybody trusts them. But the company will go in and jack up the prices. So when families go to this small town funeral home, they assume that they're not being ripped off. They trust this family-owned funeral home that's been in town forever. I mean, why wouldn't they? So some people believe they're being scammed because of this. And it goes way beyond overcharging people for services they don't need. Let me introduce you to Doug Cassidy. Come on up, Doug. He's actually here now. Just kidding. So Doug was the head of a company called National Prearranged Services, or NPS. And this business offered a prearranged funeral contract to customers. What does that mean? Well, this contract would allow customers to pay for their funeral ahead of time. So you'd be like, okay, when I die, you make all the plans yourself, right? And then you get a contract and then you pay and then you're like, we're set, so my kids don't have to worry about it. And NPS would put their payment into a trust, and regardless of inflation, they would get the funeral that they paid for with no extra fees. And, you know, for the customer, it was like, oh, this is so nice. I don't have to worry about my family having to like pay for everything, you know, like get this fat bill and everything would be taken care of. But, you know, of course, it was too good to be true. Instead, MPS, they were taking like customers' money and just putting it right into their pockets. They're like, Daddy needs a boat. So I guess they were running like a Bernie Madoff type Ponzi scheme. Yeah, I could see that. When the money was paid to the company, it was then used to pay the top officers of NPS, you know, for their yachts. Then when a customer did die, their funeral would be paid for by the money of a new customer, and so on and so on. So as long as like new customers kept coming in, NPS was able to skim money off the top. But like any Ponzi scheme, the whole thing, you know, came crashing down. Sadly, this left many victims of the scam without their money and without the funerals that they were promised. And it was just not great. This scam ran for like over 16 years. And during this time, NPS and this guy, Doug Cassidy, had collected like $450 million. Eventually, the scam was uncovered. And then Doug and like several other NPS officers, they were sentenced to prison time. It's like, lock them up forever. But they didn't. They served like less than 10 years and then they were released. But Doug specifically, he did die in 2020 of natural causes. So I wonder if he got buried or cremated. Did he have a package plan? But I do hope when he was alive, he was haunted by ghosts from the people that he screwed over, right? So when you think about death today, you know, there's a lot of technology happening around us. Hi, welcome to the future. So many people are like looking to ditch traditional ways of doing things. And people are like coming up with some very unique alternatives to, you know, the old school way of doing things. Yeah. So cremation, still popular, still hot. But like many new businesses are popping up with options for like what to do after a cremation. There's this one option you could do where you can turn your loved one's ashes into like a diamond and then be made into memorial jewelry. I like this idea. And I was like, oh, I want to do this with my dog. Didn't do it. But I like that idea, right? That sounds nice. The actual percentage of ashes to diamond is very low, but like the ashes are still technically in there. So, there's also an option to have ashes pressed into a vinyl record. Oh yeah. So, your family, your loved ones can play you and your favorite song forever. If you did that, let me know down below. I would love to know which song they picked. I would want mine to be like Dirty Pop. Sick and tired of yeah, because every time you hear that song, like you want to dance. And that's how I want to be remembered, by Dirty Pop. You heard it here first.